That's Quercus, agrifolia, and Fagaceae, Fagaceae. Coast live oak, one of the more emblematic species in the Bay Area. Certainly the most important tree of the Berkeley campus. Berkeley campus would not look like it does without these beautiful trees. And this is a juvenile. This is a more adult tree here to the right. And you can see quite a few larger individuals. And there have been many, many large individuals on this trail up to this point. They are simple, alternate leaves. And I'm going to pull a leaf off to look at it in detail. So one thing to notice is it's not really entire margins because it has these little spines. And the spines are actually the secondary veins that come all the way out to the margin and then keep going. So they're spiny margins. The next thing I'd like you to notice is that they're dark green and glossy on the top side, and they're lighter green but also glossy and reflect light on the bottom side. This is really important later on in differentiating the different groups of oaks, the way that the underside of the leaf looks. But for now, we'll just leave it at that. The next characteristic that's really important for this particular species is that these leaves are cupped. And the way I like to think about it is if you had some nacho cheese dip, these leaves, and especially some of these other ones on the tree, will be perfect for if you were going to dip into that bowl of cheese dip, you'd want to have a nice cupped leaf to get a lot of dip. Everyone see how cupped that is? Okay. This is a really, really great characteristic because there are some close relatives of this species, other live oaks, that have flat leaves. And this brings up something that I wanted to mention earlier that I forgot. And that is, when you're looking at a plant and you're going through the characteristics that I'm telling you, don't just look at one leaf. Look at many leaves of the plant because all plants have individual variation. And different individuals on this trail are going to look a little bit different from one another, and it's really important to get a good feeling for the kind of what we call the natural variation within a species. So for this plant, having cupped leaves is a very, very important characteristic. Nevertheless, you can look at this tree here and you can probably find a few examples, a few leaves that are not very cupped at all, and that's where I can encourage you to keep looking. Make sure you look at a good sample of leaves before you decide whether or not a certain characteristic is present or not. Okay, the younger kind of juvenile trees is usually pretty light gray and smooth. When the tree gets older, it gets darker and darker, and usually kind of grayish, blackish in color. No obvious stripes or furrows or anything like that. All oaks have a pretty characteristic look to them. They have kind of a fractal branching pattern where there isn't any main straight stem with lateral branches going off. Oaks generally have multiple sort of main stems that kind of branch in like I said, a kind of a fractal pattern. This was a very important species for the California natives that lived here, still live here. And acorns were a very important staple. And acorns have a lot of protein, they have a lot of fat, and they have some carbohydrates. And what you do is you collect about a pound of acorns at a time, and you pound them with a mortar and pestle into a powder, what they call acorn flour, and then you leach it with cold water and get the tannins out. Tannins are those bitter chemicals that if you might be familiar with from a really strong black tea or red wine has a lot of tannins in it. Well, those tannins, if you leave it in the acorn, make it very bitter and difficult to digest. And the function of tannins is to bind proteins and actually make it so insects especially can't digest the nitrogen that's inside. So if you eat acorns without leaching out the tannins, it's not going to be very nutritious. You're not going to access that protein. But if you leach it with a lot of water, those tannins will eventually wash out, and then you have a nice flour that you can make a bread. They make you can bake it in a kind of an earth oven, or you can cook it over and mix stuff with it into an acorn soup. I tried it, both the bread and the soup. They're very delicious. So people would really manage oaks here in the Bay Area and throughout lowland California. And this particular species was really important. One thing that's interesting about oaks, though, is that oaks generally produce a lot of acorns, but they don't produce them every year. So they may produce acorns year after year after year, and then one year, 0 acorns. And this is a phenomenon called masting, and it's thought to be an evolved response to mammalian seed predators. In particular. So imagine a squirrel population that's eating acorns, and they eat every single acorn of a population of trees, and every year that squirrel population gets a little bit bigger, eating more and more acorns. And then one year, no acorns are produced. You would imagine there'd be a lot of starvation, and that squirrel population would be hard hit, so that the following year, many fewer squirrels, many more acorns, and you get much more germination for the next generation. Al, you get a piece of wire? Pretty please. All right. Coast live oak, Quercus agrifolia, alternate, simple leaves, glossy green, reflects light on both sides, spiny tipped margins, and a cup scoop-like thing, perfect for dipping into cheese dip.